invite you into the 6th chapter of Mark. And the disciples and Jesus are in the thick of it. The ministry is going fast and furious at this point. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. And as Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when they crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. And when they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about that whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. So ends the reading of God's holy word.
Thanks be to God.
Let us pray. Wellspring of understanding, source of all wisdom, we turn to you as we listen yet again to this sacred text from Mark. It is a bit of a story, O gracious one, and we ask that the depth of this story would be made known to us, would find its way into our deepest understanding, that we might be blessed in hearing it, and in some way, living it. This we ask in your holy name. Amen. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to start out with a kind of a silly trivia question, but bear with me. I think it relates to what follows. We'll see. What do Superman, Spider-Man, and the Flying Nun have in common? It's kind of a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer now. We can talk about it later.
Cloaks.
Well, for one, they're all famous characters from television and the silver screen. And each one possessing a very unusual means of transportation, which can render them a bit conspicuous at times. So they do occasionally draw quite a crowd. But beyond their celebrity status, they are also, each one in his or her own way, guardians of the public welfare, precisely because of their special abilities. And they are on duty pretty much 24/7. Because you see, it's hard to take a vacation when you're the only one on the block that knows how to fly. You think about one particular superhero, if you will. How many times, if you think back on this old television series, did you see that kind of crestfallen face of Sister Bertrill, played by Sally Field, when the good sister realizes that yet another crisis has surfaced and it has called for her gift of flight? And so she once again, trying to do it surreptitiously, leaps into action. And if you'll pardon the terrible pun, none too soon. But you don't have to be a flying nun to know how the needs of others can stack up very quickly. Especially when the others find out that you can meet that particular need. When word gets out that you have a talent, watch out. Next thing you know, you may not necessarily be flying, but you could be washing dishes, or cooking pies, or roasting turkeys, or balancing the books, or reading hymns, or winding the clock, or filling the candle oil, tending the lilies, visiting the sick. As the old expression goes, talents arise to meet the needs of the moment, But it's also true, I think, that needs arise to challenge every talent. Which is pretty much what was happening to Jesus at this point. By this point in the story, Jesus didn't have to go in search of the lost lambs. All the lost lambs were coming, searching for him. Whole flocks of lost lambs, hungry, hurting, lost lambs, trailing him right around the lake. Even getting there before him to a place that he called deserted. For some reason, it kind of brought to mind our national parks. Exquisitely beautiful expanses of mountains and lakes and prairies and gorgeous pieces of property that forward-thinking people like Teddy Roosevelt and other people set aside for posterity. And I am 100% in favor of national parks. I love them. But as soon as we establish a park and promote its beauty, we get 1 million people a year visiting that national park, coming to enjoy that beauty and trampling that beauty into oblivion if we're not careful. And so goes the dilemma of national parks. A tension between public access on the one hand and preservation on the other. Between, in perhaps more succinct terms, use and rest. As Jesus invited his disciples to the place that was set apart, he clearly knew that they needed rest. They didn't even have a chance to eat, to be fed, to be replenished, so as to then jump back into the fray, so to speak. They tried. They tried to get away, but people recognized them and scrambled to the so-called deserted place, and even before the disciples got there, there were needs waiting for them. So what do you call a deserted place that's filled with people? I don't know, but you don't call it deserted anymore. And in the words of the immortal Yogi Berra, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. And it was too crowded to rest at least, and so the healing and the helping began again in earnest. But you know what? Sometimes I think we like it that way. Sometimes it's easier to work than it is to rest in solitude. Esther DeWall writes this little piece, this paragraph. How often it is difficult for most of us to give solitude any sort of priority in the kind of life that we live today. How we avoid it. How we are frightened of being alone. How easy it is never to let it happen. There's always something or someone to fill the void, even if it's no more than turning on the radio for company. I guess that is a question of inner conviction as well as external pressure. The world simply does not understand this need to be alone. End of quote. I think as we reflect on the story from Mark, it's important to notice who does what in this passage. Jesus invites the disciples to a deserted place. The crowd engulfs the disciples in the not-so-deserted place anymore. Contrary to the impulse within many of us, Jesus wants us to rest. Rest even in the presence of all the needs around us. Many of us have a hard time doing it. If there's somebody lonely or somebody afraid or somebody discouraged, distraught, we know it. We have a hard time, many of us, setting that aside and relaxing and enjoying ourselves. Many of us live by the motto of yet another superhero who went by the name of Underdog, who was known to say, in that real nasally Wally Cox voice, when help is needed, I am not slow, for it's hip, 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 and away I go. I don't know if Underdog ever took a vacation. If he did, it probably wasn't a very exciting episode. In religious circles, we often refer to deserted places as retreats. Notice your reaction when you hear the word retreat, religious retreat. Are you drawn to the notion of a retreat? Or do you run from it faster than a speeding bullet? I I think part of what unnerves us about retreats is that we don't know what we'll do when we get there. We know what to do at a turkey dinner. If we don't know, we ask Sally or Pat. We generally know what to do at other settings, in our lives, whether it's at home, at work, grocery store, hopefully here at worship. But it's not always that way in worship. You ever been to another church service that is different enough that you didn't know exactly what was going to be coming next? I did. Just went to an Episcopal funeral. We may find ourselves, like me, scrambling to find the right page or even the right hymnal to say the words that everyone else seems to have memorized. And in situations like that, recently I watched the person down the pew like a hawk to see when they're going to stand up and when they're going to sit down, because I don't want to be left in the lurch. The deserted place that Jesus invited his disciples to was not full of the sick and the sad and the starving. Unlike where the disciples had just been working, this place didn't have obvious needs, clear tasks to do. It was a deserted place. It was a vacated place from which we get the word vacation. A place devoid of pretty much anything. And a place that can scare the wits out of us. We like to know our place in the routine. We like to know what's going to be expected of us. I think sometimes many of us just feel better being able to pull our oar. And if there's not an oar readily available, we'll go find an oar. Case in point, I sat in my favorite chair not too many days ago with my journal in hand, jotting down my sense of gratitude, which I do from time to time. Gratitude for this time of relaxation, chance to take a load off, relish some downtime. And I wrote in this journal at 2:15. I always put the time down. And I thought I'd hang in the chair for a while and just savor that moment. I reflected on the project that I just finished, which was constructing a screen frame for a window. I felt pretty good about it. Which then got me to thinking about another project, one that was equally enticing. And by 2:30, I'd launched into that next project, forgetting all about the relaxation, putting together the tools for this next endeavor. So much for savoring the downtime. Years ago, it was pretty common practice for teachers to ask their students to write an essay in September entitled, "What Did I Do on My Summer Vacation?" But I wonder if we might spin that a little bit differently this time. Maybe write an essay, a short one, what I plan to do on my summer vacation. Or maybe better yet, what I plan not to do on my summer vacation. In the spirit of nurturing ourselves, to allow God to do what the psalmist promises that God will do, to restore our soul, to lead us beside still waters, and not have to pull the trash out of the still waters, or to filter the still waters, or legislate to keep the still waters clean, or to put up a fence around the still waters, but just to drink in the peace of being around the still waters. Came across a list of things that an artist put together that she thought were options for how to cultivate the still waters and the peace. These are weird, I admit. But see if one of them appeals to you. Learn to watch snails. Take a moon bath. Hug a tree. Draw with chalk. Swing on a swing set. Write a love letter. Cry in a movie. Sit beside a still stream. Take a delicious nap. Laugh out loud. Smell a flower. Giggle with children. Tell a story. Color with crayons. Plant something in a pot. Gaze at the brightest star. Listen to your favorite song. whichever you may choose, and I may not be from that list. Perhaps you can nurture your spirit in that way. Who knows, maybe you can break my record and sit quietly for more than 15 minutes. Time's a wasted, so go waste some time. Jesus calls us into service, to be sure. Jesus also calls us into rest. Enjoy.